Happy Thanksgiving to you today. I'm grateful with you today for just an opportunity to give thanks for family, for friends, for faith in a gracious God, and for hope in His care and presence as we wait for His leading through this unparalleled COVID pandemic. Paul's letter to the Philippians, chapter 4, verses 4 through 7, and verse 19. Rejoice in the Lord always. And again, I'll say it, rejoice. Let your gentleness be known to everyone. The Lord is at hand. Don't be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and petition with thanksgiving. Let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God that surpasses all understanding will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. And my God will supply every need of yours through His riches and glory in Christ Jesus. With everything that we are facing as a country and as a church and as individual Christians, I want to remind you of a great theological truth that my grandfather told me decades ago when he said, "Only turkeys don't give thanks." I want you to think with me for just a few moments about the habit of being thankful. A habit is a prevailing disposition or practice of a person's thoughts or behavior. The habit of being thankful. And thankfulness is merely being conscious of benefits received. We hear a great deal today about habits. Many times it's only about bad habits. But why shouldn't we think and talk about good habits as well? These habits are just as real and as powerful for a force of good in our lives, just like bad habits are for our detriment. What's more, the only possible way to keep out bad habits is to replace them with good habits. Think for a minute about the value of thankfulness. Thankfulness tends to quell our complaining spirit. We are prone, especially in certain moods, to begin to complain. Each one of us have had a time or another when we imagined or even said it out loud of a particular difficulty that we are going through at the time. How do we prevent that sliding then into complaining? One way certainly is the habit of thankfulness to God. When the spirit of fear or doubt or even ingratitude begins to surface, we can suddenly choose to express our thankfulness to God for what we do have, rather than only to mention the things that we want. And we might even sometimes end up laughing at ourselves because we all have such a dour and dismal default attitude. Thankfulness tends to enhance our enjoyment too. We all know that when we receive a gift, the reaction of gratitude only multiplies our enjoyment of the gift that we've received. Thankfulness can soothe our stress as well. People who are facing a number of trials and aren't accustomed to being grateful sometimes find that the memory of past joys only adds salt to the wound of their present circumstances. But it's just the opposite for those who have learned to habitually give thanks. For them, the recollection and recitation of happy memories is a wonderful comfort. Thankfulness also can help alleviate anxiety. Do you notice how Paul states it here? In nothing be anxious, but in everything with prayer and petition with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God, and the peace of God that surpasses all understanding will guide and guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. Notice how we are to avoid anxiety by praying for the future with thanksgiving and giving thanks for the past. Thankfulness has at least two other positive effects, and one is to create hope. Every glance backwards, tracing the mile markers of God's grace and goodness, will only help us to look forward, even with more hope. Also, thankfulness strengthens us with endurance and with peace. We all know how much easier it is and effective it is when we work with cheerfulness. And the very seed of cheerfulness germinates in the soil of thanksgiving for the past and hope for the future. So, if this habit of thankfulness is so valuable, it's certainly worth our while to develop it. There are many ways that can happen for sure, but let's just sum them up in at least two broad categories. Number one, we should be grateful to God for everything that's enjoyable. The Apostle James says, every good and perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights. To have everything that you would ever want is, for the most part, an impossible dream. But to like everything that you have is not only a possibility, it is a high privilege of trusting our all-powerful God who promises to meet all of our daily needs. So, number one, practice gratitude daily for all the good thing that God brings into your life. And I've found that it works best when you do it when it happens. Secondly, we should be thankful for the things that try our soul. The Apostle Paul doesn't say, for everything give thanks. He says, in everything give thanks. He doesn't tell us to be grateful for everything, but in everything that happens to give thanks. It's in God's grace. It could always be far worse. We could live without His word. We could live without His love, without His presence, without His promise. And even in the worst of times, there's always something left. Sometimes suffering even brings more gifts with it. Or sometimes it can bring bitter complaining and selfish brooding. It all depends on how we respond. Skillful composers often make use of discords in music to create contrast and depth. When the discord is resolved, it makes the harmony that much sweeter and more moving. Brothers and sisters, be of good cheer. There is coming a time when all pain and trials in this present life will only have seemed like a brief, discordant prelude to an everlasting harmony. So, how can the habit of thankfulness be formed and maintained in us? Well, how do we form other habits? We take pains to do the very thing that we want on every possible occasion, and we avoid taking a break from it. So the habit of thankfulness, if we want that to be a consistent practice in our lives, don't just start next week or next year, but begin today and tomorrow and the next day. And not just for the great and the amazing things that happen, but for whatever you enjoy, and even for what has been difficult. Then keep your eyes open and your radar on as you search every day, moment by moment, for the things to give thanks to God for. Again, to have everything that we like is an impossibility, but to like everything that we have is not only a possibility, but it's a privilege of those who trust the Lord to provide all their needs, not all their wants, but all their needs. And remember, don't be a turkey who doesn't know how to give thanks. Happy Thanksgiving to you.